The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat.
You like that psalm? That's a good one. It's your favorite? You know what? It's C.S. Lewis's favorite too. And here's a quote from C.S. Lewis about this psalm. He says, "It is the greatest among the psalms and one of the greatest lyrics in all the world." That's pretty cool, isn't it? That's pretty high praise from a guy like him. Alex, can you throw up that first passage that I just wanted to, should apologize. I've got a lot of slides this morning. I'm not apologizing for that. I'm apologizing for the fact that Alex ended up having to be on the slides today when I've got a lot of slides. But the poetry of this passage just created lots of images in my mind, and I wanted to capture those images in the version of slides. So I've just got another version of the passage up here, and just focusing in on some things that are really stand out to me. I'm only going to cover the first 6 verses today, and then 2 weeks from now I'll cover the rest of the passage. It's really a two-parter, and this psalm is really broken up into 2 parts. So again, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim. So proclaim. They proclaim the work of his hand. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their word to the end of the world. In the heavens, God pitched a tent. I like this little image here. Pitched a tent for the sun. It's like a bridegroom coming forth from his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises on one end of the heaven and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived from its warmth. That's a picture sort of at the end there of how there's one piece of creation that is just sort of speaking and shining and showing God over the entire earth. Day after day, it rises, it crosses the earth. It's like it's speaking the glory of God from one end to the other. And that's the passage. That's what it says. That's what I'm covering today. And I'm just going to look at these first 6 verses. And this whole idea about how nature, the heavens, the stars, and the splendor of creation itself declares and testifies to the actual glory of God. So, first picture, Alex. There we go, we're on track here. And without a doubt, it is pretty easy, I think, to recognize that the fingerprints of God are all over creation, right? That's kind of the point of this passage. The heavens, they declare. The skies, they proclaim. Day after day, night after night, all over the earth, their voice goes out. Their collective voice of all of creation, it's heard. It's heard around the world in a figurative sense. And it is constantly testifying of its creator. Right? And so it is with anything created or designed by anyone. Picture 2, Alex. Right? Anything that is designed or created by anyone, it speaks something of its creator, right? A creation speaks something of its creator. It reflects, it communicates something of the thoughts, the ideas, the will of its designer. To be sure, a creation's very existence is credited to its creator. And in that, its very being is giving some version of credit or glory to the one who created it. In short, right, statements are made through our creations, and credits and accolades are given, good or bad, fame or infamy, through the things that we design and we create. They speak about us, right, if we're the ones that created them. And probably the best human example of this is the many and varied forms of art that we humans create. Slide number 3. Without a doubt, art speaks. It speaks of its creator. are expressions of art. They speak all kinds of things, all kinds of subjects, all kinds of reasons are spoken in art that come from the artist. But more than anything, art speaks about the artist itself, about his thoughts, about his or her feelings, about his or her influences upon their life. And it speaks a message, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, that the artist is trying to get across. And so it is with this world and this universe of ours. In this psalm, David recognizes all of this and sort of sings along with creation the glory of its creator. I mean, after all, he's part of the creation, and he joins with it. And I think that at least most people can recognize and sense some of the glory and the greatness of God just through observing nature. Slide 4. I think most people can understand what David is getting at when he says the heavens declare the glory of God and the skies proclaim the work of his hands, right? I mean, that's probably mostly true, right? I think that even God's skeptics, even they take pause at least once in a while and marvel at creation. And deep down must recognize that their marveling is giving at least some level of credit to some great being who must be responsible for this. So, quick story. During the French Revolution, there was the story is told of a young atheistic revolutionary who was threatening a pastor and claiming to this pastor that the revolution would pull down all of the churches, all of the steeples, and all of the places of worship, and that the people would no longer have any object to remind them of their religious superstitions, and that they were going to start with this pastor's church right here and tear it down. And the pastor replied to the revolutionary, and he says, "You may do that, but you cannot pull down the sun and the moon and the stars. These all declare the glory of God. If every house of prayer is destroyed, and if every preacher is forced to keep silent, the heavens above will forever declare God's glory, and the birds will sing his praises, and the wind and the waves will say, 'Our God reigns.'" Right? And I think that most people have a sense of what that means and how that works. And even deep down are compelled, at least a little, by that, by such a thought as this. And even, I guess, this atheistic revolutionary was somewhat compelled by it, because as it turned out, he left that church alone and didn't actually dare to tear it down. Picture number 6, Albert Einstein. He was certainly compelled by God's testimony in the natural world. Einstein, who studied and unlocked so many of the mysteries of the laws and the order of the natural universe, he was convinced. And he was convinced because of the amazing order and the mind-boggling extent of the design and the precision, and yet still the mystery of the universe. He was convinced that there must be a great and glorious designer behind it all. He was certain of it. For him, he just could not accept that it could be by chance or random accident that this universe came into being. So he was famed for saying, God doesn't play dice, right? The evidence says God doesn't just roll the dice. To Einstein, this universe, he believed, was not the evidence of and did not testify to some endless random dice rolling or happenstance. For Einstein, he could only see the evidence and the testimony of very specific, very spectacular, very intentional design and creation, even marvelous and mysterious and supreme design and creation by an equally marvelous and mysterious creator. Picture number 6. Kim and I actually have a friend who ended up becoming a believer while he was driving a tour bus one summer, all summer, through the Rocky Mountains. And it's not as though anyone was, or any person was particularly testifying to him during this time.
but rather it was God speaking to him day after day after day, all summer long, as he was driving his bus with utterly awestruck groups of people through some of the most amazing, most spectacular, most breathtaking pieces of creation that can be found anywhere on earth. And in the midst of all of that, and through all of that spectacular creation, God was speaking to him and getting his attention. And he became fully convinced in his heart and soul and mind that there was a God, and that this God was good and beautiful, and that he must get to know this God in whose creation he lived and in fact was a part of. And that was where his life of faith began. God speaking to him through the beauty of the Rocky Mountains that whole summer. And the point of the first part of this psalm is that creation itself speaks. It speaks and it testifies, and it even gives glory to its creator. However, it should also be added and noted that this form of communication, it certainly has its limits, right? It has its limitations. And I suppose it has its limitations because we human beings who are listening to what creation is speaking, we have our limitations. And in the end, what creation speaks can be taken by us as subjective, right? It can be taken by us as subjective and therefore misunderstood or even twisted or ignored altogether. And Lord knows when subjective is subject to us human beings, with our great variety of opinions and preferences and worldviews, our great variety of agendas and prejudices and natural self-pride, well, when anything is subject to that, Lord knows the message can become somewhat varied and skewed at best and downright twisted and turned upside down at worst. So, let me give you an example of that. For example, the Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, he notes that the voice of God speaking through nature can become twisted and turned right upside down. And Sean read this last week as well. I'm going to read it again. For some reason, God seems to want us to really listen to this passage over these past 2 weeks. So, again, from Romans chapter 1, this is much of the same passage Sean read last week. It says this, but God showed his anger from heaven against all sinfulness and wickedness and against those who pushed the truth away from themselves. For the truth about God is known to them instinctively. God has put this knowledge in their hearts from the time the world was created. People have seen, right? From the time the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Right? They've seen the earth and the sky and all that God made. They can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. Yes, yet they knew God, but they didn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. Instead, they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. The result was that their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they became utter fools instead. And instead of worshiping the ever-living, glorious God, they worshiped idols made to look like mere people, or birds, or animals, and snakes. They worshiped the things God made rather than the Creator himself, who is to be forever praised. It's like, wow. Now, is that ever getting it turned upside down from what was intended? So much of the world has shifted over to this idea of the worship of Mother Nature when she herself is attempting to lead us in the worship of the Creator. Man, that's upside down. Now, the other point that should be noted about all of this is that not all scientists and not all those who study nature and the laws of the universe come to the same conclusion as Albert Einstein did. That's absolutely true. We have a way of twisting this. Einstein was struck by a great deal of awe and wonder and, frankly, humility. That's really what he was struck by, was this level of humility in all that he was discovering about the natural order of things. And that's not always the path that knowledgeable, advanced, progressive human beings take who have managed to unlock some of the secrets of the universe, which up to this point had never been unlocked. Got this amazing quote from the first man in space, right? Yuri Gagarin, Russian cosmonaut, scientist, astronaut, etc. Allegedly, he said, radioed from his capsule up in space, looking down on the earth, he radioed down to earth and said, "I see no evidence of God up here." I mean, how tight must you have your eyes and your heart closed to say that? Well, you know what? The truth is, he didn't say that. The story gets even worse. A very good friend of Gagarin said he would never have said that. It was actually Nikita Khrushchev who said that, who put those words in Gagarin's mouth, who said allegedly that that's what he said from space when he never actually said it. And he said it in an address to the Kremlin in Russia. And there you have a picture of a guy who just is going out of his way to discredit the Creator for his own agenda and political and personal reasons. You see, for some, rather than inspiring humility and awe, this is prone to inspire levels of pride and even arrogance, as it clearly did with Khrushchev. The ability to unlock some hitherto unknown secrets of creation causes them to believe that they may unlock all of creation's secrets, or at least enough of the nuclear, atomic, genetic, DNA, quantum physics secrets of our universe to begin to harness and dominate and manipulate and control and engineer and clone and in time perhaps even create for themselves. Right? Create life, create matter. Create as a legitimate creator, a godlike, glorious creator of their own. And this takes us right back to the original sin in the former paradise of Eden, doesn't it? When the serpent said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and if you so much as touch it, you will die?" "You will not surely die," the serpent said. "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God." You will be like God, knowing good and evil, determining and creating for yourselves what is good and what is evil, like God. And oh my goodness, the desire to be like God, to have that kind of authority, to be able to control and rule and create in our likeness according to our design and our objectives. To be the masters of our own lives and souls and destinies. Picture number 8, Alex. I think I might have missed one there for you. Picture number 8. Friedrich Nietzsche. You know, one thing I'm impressed by Nietzsche is that he's very honest. He was very honest about exactly this desire in humans. He said, there cannot be a God, because if there were one, I could not believe that I was not he. That was his honest opinion on this. His desire to be God was so huge. This is the problem with fallen human nature. Pride can just too easily cause us to take that image of God, thing that is in us, and take it, well, frankly, just way too far. Even to the point where it's not enough to merely be created in the image of God by God, but to where we actually want to become gods of a sort in our own right. It was a problem in the beginning. It's frankly still a problem today. And it seems the smarter and the more technologically advanced and dominant amongst nature we become, all the stronger is our desire and our ambition for godlike status and importance and power. It's the way we work too often in our human nature. And finally, the last problem with nature's witness and revelation of God is that not only is it somewhat subjective, as we've already said, but it's also not very specific. Nature's testimony about God is not very specific. And even when we do manage to listen to what nature is saying about its creator, what it says is just not that specific. Creation is only able to give us a fairly general revelation of what and who God is all about. It can in general say that God must exist. It can in general say that God must be powerful and awesome, that God must be very smart and the most amazing and creative of engineers. But specifically, there is very much that nature cannot communicate to us about the Creator, about God. It cannot, for instance, say whether this great Creator God knows about me. Can't tell us that. Among all the billions upon billions of stars and planets across trillions and trillions of miles of galaxy, does he know I'm here? It can't answer that. Right? It can conjure up the question. It can even conjure up the concern that maybe somehow he has lost track of us in all that he's created. Picture number 9. And we might start to wonder, are we not much more than the Who's in Whoville in Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who? Forgotten people on what's nothing more than a dust speck of a planet lost in a vast universe. And picture number 10. And why, right? Why does nature sometimes go crazy on us? When sometimes it's so beautiful, sometimes it erupts in volcanoes and typhoons and hurricanes and the like. And why does that happen? And why, for that matter, do we happen? Why do we live? What do we live for? What's the purpose of it all? What's it all about? Creation can't explain that for us. It just raises the questions. Lots and lots of questions like that. Picture number 11. If God does know about me, and about some of the pain here in this world, and why and what is the purpose and the reason behind life here in this world, if he knows that, if he has plans and purposes for us, can he help? Can I understand those? Can he save? Can I get to know him? Can I know his will and his purposes? Can I relate with him? Worship him? And then, of course, there's the big question. What about beyond this world? What about beyond this life? Beyond my life? Does the Creator have plans and purposes beyond the here and the now of this world? And do they include me and us? And if so, how then should I live? The revelation of nature doesn't answer those things. It simply raises those questions. Clearly, God created me with the ability to think about such things and to ponder them and even to worry or wonder about them. But has he given the answers? Well, again, that is where the general voice and testimony of nature, of creation, it falls short. To know those things, we need something more specific. We need a voice, a word, a message, a revelation that is more specific. So let me illustrate again with the whole illustration of art and the work of an artist. Picture number 12. The example of a painter and his painting. And I'm going to use this picture of Pablo Picasso, probably his most famous creation, Guernica. It's one of my favorite paintings, maybe my favorite painting. Now, by looking at this picture, you do get a sense of what its creator is attempting to communicate. It tells us something at least about what the artist must be feeling. And we get this sense, for example, of chaos. Right? You get that? You pick up on that? There is also a sense being expressed here of pain. You get that? Even great pain. I would say even a sense of some significant anger being expressed through this painting. The angles, the twisted and contorted figures, the lack of color. This is not a black and white photo. This is the color of it. They all work together to make a general statement that is quite profound. I would say even quite loud, but not very specific, right? Not very specific. To get more specific answers to all the questions that this painting raises, well, we need to hear more specifically from its creator and know some specific things about him and his painting, his perspective, and the context of this whole thing. So let me fill some of that in for you. Probably many of you know this already, but let's walk through it. Picture 13. Picasso painted this mural as the centerpiece for the Spanish pavilion at the 1937 World's Fair. That's what it was painted for. The official theme of that World's Fair, which was held in Paris, was the celebration of modern technology. That was the theme of the fair. It was hoped that an optimistic look at mankind's impressive advances would lift the nations of the world out of economic depression and the social unrest of the 1930s. That's what they hoped. This was going to be a hopeful celebration of mankind's achievements that would help the world turn a corner. There was particular excitement around the whole aeronautics pavilion since so many of mankind's advancements during the last couple decades had been in learning how to and perfecting flight. New airplanes, faster airplanes, airplanes that fly higher and longer and farther. This fair was going to be a spectacular expression of all that mankind can do and achieve in this modern era of science and technology. However, leading up to the fair, Picasso's homeland of Spain was embroiled in civil war. And on April 27th, 1937, just a few months before the fair opened, Adolf Hitler decided to meddle in the Spanish Civil War, mostly to test his newly developed planes and bombs. The small town of Guernica in northern Spain was chosen for this experimental attack. And for 3 hours, the town was pounded, carpeted with newly developed high explosives dropped from technologically advanced planes, the most advanced in the world. Townspeople were cut down by machine gun fire from those planes. Guernica burned for 3 days. 3 days. The town only contained 7,000 citizens. 1,600 of them were senselessly killed and or wounded. 3 months before the World's Fair. Picasso was actually conscripted to paint a painting for the World's Fair. He had done another project. He abandoned it. And in less than 3 months, he painted this. 3 months later, he delivered this painting that he called Guernica to the Spanish pavilion at this celebrated technology fair in Paris. That's making a statement, isn't it? That is a profound statement. One Nazi official at the fair responded to the painting by saying this: "It's nothing more than a hodgepodge of body parts that any 4-year-old could have painted." And amazingly, Picasso's mural was, at the time, considered by many at the fair to be an unfortunate dark spot on what was supposed to be a spotlight of hope for mankind's brightening future around his scientific and technological achievements. But you see, Guernica told the other side of the story. Guernica revealed the other side of the story. Guernica speaks about the dark side of technology, the dark side of impressive human ability and human nature and human ambition and pride and blind nationalism. Picture 14. And of course, that message brought by Picasso proved to be prophetic, because a year and a half after the fair, all of Europe and indeed the world was embroiled in World War II. And mankind's impressive technology was the centerpiece of that exhibition too, right? Ending with the grand finale of the dropping of the atomic bomb on both Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Picture 15. And with all of that specific information, with all of that specific explanation and context, the strange images and the painful shapes of the painting suddenly become much more understandable, don't they? It starts to fill in some of the questions, doesn't it? The anger, the emotion speaks much more clearly. Its message becomes much more profound. And actually, that just scratches the surface, what we covered. What we just talked about just barely scratches the surface. Imagine what it would be like if you could sit down with Picasso and have him explain to you each of the images in that painting and what he meant by that image and this image. For me, I'm most taken by this one. This is the image in all of the painting that actually grasps me. This image of a mother holding a limp and I assume dead child, crying out in agony. Picasso called this lady the Guernica Madonna. And it indeed looks like some of the classical paintings and sculptures of Mary cradling the body of Jesus after he was taken down from the cross. Picture 15. Right? You see the similarity? Picasso, you see, he creates an image, because the one difference is that this is a baby, not a grown-up Jesus coming down from the cross. Picasso creates an image of a baby Jesus killed before he could grow up and complete the work of redemption that he came to fulfill. Snuffed out before his mission could even be undertaken. This is intended by Picasso to be an ultimate expression of hopelessness. That's how he paints it. It is, if you will, a version of a successful slaughter of the innocents. Remember when Herod went to kill the little children? What if he succeeded? How hopeless would it be if he succeeded? That's what Picasso is trying to capture in this painting. The bull behind him portrays Herod achieving his goal of killing the Messiah, and all hope with him while he was still a baby. This is the kind of hopelessness in mankind and his technology that Picasso is trying to portray. I would love to talk with him more about this particular image and the other ones as well, and all that he meant by it. But you know what? Picasso didn't actually like to talk about or explain his paintings much. He was often asked about them, especially this one, but he would decline to say much of anything, to give much of a specific interpretation of it. In fact, he said this, quote by Picasso. He said, "It isn't up to the painter to define the symbols. Otherwise, it would be better if he wrote them out in so many words." Right? You see, Picasso wanted to keep his audiences guessing, wondering, and exploring his art, thinking about it, talking about it, studying it to a large degree. That's what general revelation does. It communicates general messages of its creator and keeps them guessing, keeps them asking the questions, keeps them pondering the specifics. But you know what? That's not what God has done. God didn't just leave it at the general. God did create a masterpiece that makes quite a statement and that has left us truly with many thoughts and ponderings and questions. But he didn't stop talking there either. Picture 17, Alex. He did, in fact, write out so much of his will and his instructions and his answers to us in so many words. It's the scriptures. It's the Bible. And that is what the rest of this psalm is all about, right? So you see, this psalm is an absolute praise of the natural revelation of God and the specific revelation of God. It flows from the natural revelation of God into the specific revelation of God in Scripture. The second half of this psalm praises God even more so for his very specific message written to us in the pages of Scripture. And we're so fortunate to have it. We're so fortunate that he did that. And my goodness, what we need to do is read it. I think that David would say too that this is a call. This poetic verse is a call for us to appreciate the Word of God, to use it, to read it, to know it, to dwell upon it, to live it. Right? Because it's worth more than gold, he's going to say in the next section. And it's more desirable and pleasing and tasty than honey, even honey from the comb. And yet, you know what? Even the written word has its limitations too. They're not as many, and it's much more specific, but even it has its limitations. And we're going to explore that 2 weeks from now. So we're going to have a break between this. Herman is going to be sharing next week, and then the week after that, I'll pick this up and do the second half of this psalm. Let's pray. God, I thank you that we are so fearfully and wonderfully created. That the world around us is so wonderfully created. That you speak so much of yourself in your creation. And even, Lord, that you challenge us with ponderings and thoughts and wonder as we look at and listen to what creation says. And God, along with David, I praise you even more for the fact that you followed that up with your specific revelation of your word, written out in so many words, as a love letter and a history and poems and songs and gospels and epistles to us. God, thank you so much for that gift. And may we just dwell in it and understand the goodness, the beauty, the value, and the desirableness of that gift that you've given us in your word. Amen.